Based out of a failed attempt to remake Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Shape of Water saw Guillermo Del Toro question what would have actually happened if Kay had gone off with the Gill-Man. Unquestionably a unique romantic movie. Here we find Del Toro at his most sympathetic for his own Gill-Man creation, while at the same time crafting some of the most visually arresting footage of his career, something the Academy would reward his efforts for by rewarding the film not only the Best Film, but also Best Director awards at the 90th Academy Awards. But is this really as enchanting a romance as Del Toro would have us believe, or is this more just Del Toro trying to provide sympathy for another of his monster creations? I'm Owen.
I'm Kim.
And you're listening to Movies and Tea. Let's take it to the booth. So here we are. We are now on the final episode. You know, the last time we're here to do this, you know, we're reunited again to bring you this final episode of Movies and Tea for this season, as we wrap up the Guillermo del Toro back catalogue by looking at Shape of Water, which is the film which finally won him the grand prize, so to speak. I mean, he got the not only best film but also best director award for Shape of Water, and it's certainly a film which made a number of top 10 lists the year it came out. So Kim, this wasn't a first time viewing for yourself, it was first time viewing for myself, so what are your sort of initial thoughts on Shape of Water?
I remember when I first saw it, I really loved, you know, as usual, you know, Del Toro does a really good job with the visuals and just how everything is, you know, shown, and just like, you know, the differences in color and a lot of that sort of thing. And obviously this one is a second time jumping into a romance in a pretty much fantasy setting. I've never seen the Creature of Black Lagoon before, so I have no comparison to it. But I think that the second time watching it, I actually felt like it was kind of like a little bit like the main girl was kind of like the Little Mermaid, who lost her voice, and, you know, she has, you know, she likes to dance and she likes music and that sort of thing. I kind of had that sort of feeling, and then I felt like, you know, it was kind of like a reverse in a way, because you have obviously the creature who she encounters and you know, the thing and whatever follows after that, and in more of an adult setting, obviously, in a darker story, in all that sense. I don't know if you agree with me, but that's how I felt the second time watching it. I think it still lives up the second time, which is good, because obviously, if people haven't listened to Crimson Peak yet, which you probably should, I didn't like my second viewing of Crimson Peak. So obviously this one, Del Toro has a better grasp of not only like just like the romantic elements, as well as the fantasy, as well, and I guess the mystery. I don't know how to describe this film.
Yeah, it's many things that Del Toro brings together. I mean, obviously at the same, he's trying to craft a monster film and he's trying to craft a romantic film, and I think the fact that it's a woman falling in love with a fish man, I think that got a lot of people's attention straight off, and at the same time it's kind of cute. It for some reason, perhaps it's just the Del Toro logic rubs off on us all, but for some reason this film works, and I was kind of enchanted by it. I mean, the film itself, it's set in 1962, be it a fantastical version 1962, so we've got elements of the Cold War, and we're introduced to this woman who's called Lisa, and her backstory was that she was basically found abandoned as a child by the side of a river. She's got these mysterious wounds on the back of her neck, and she's completely mute and only communicates through sign language. At the same time, her real friend, her only sort of like friends, are her closeted next door neighbor Giles, who works as an advertising illustrator, and her co-worker Zelda, who she works with at this. I mean, how would you describe it? It's sort of like a research base. It's a military.
Yeah, it's like a government top secret facility for all things, you know, that the government kind of is experimenting but doesn't want the world to know about yet, kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's almost like Del Toro was trying to create his own precursor to the Hellboy Institute in many ways, because the main part of the story is obviously this facility brings in this mysterious Gill-Man who's been captured in the Amazon River by Colonel Richard Strickland, who's basically he's a bit of a bastard, played by Michael Shannon, and he is just completely by the board. He's just there to keep this creature under wraps and so that it can be studied, and he thinks like nothing of it using a cattle prod on it, and he's got very little humanity for this creature. He just sees it as being a monster, whereas Alyssa stumbles across this creature and starts visiting him in secret, and the two form this like bond. She teaches him sign language and feeds him eggs and plays music for him. And I don't know about yourself, Kim, but do you see the link between this Gill-Man and Abe Sapien from Hellboy?
Well, I mentioned it when we reviewed Hellboy already.
That's right.
Yeah, that the creature was, obviously I didn't want to talk too much about it because at that time you hadn't seen The Shape of Water yet. So there's like definitely this link that I feel of something like a precursor to Hellboy and what happened after that, So I don't know what the creature, obviously maybe it's a bit of an inspiration as well. Maybe it's kind of like bringing his projects together because, Del Toro kind of has that, Del Toro seems to be that type of director and that who likes to bring, he likes using the same actors that he works with, and he likes to bring in a lot of like similar things that we can relate to. And I mean, even in this film, I mean, the fact that you mentioned, Michael Shannon, who plays Strickland.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, every single film that Del Toro has done and that we've reviewed pretty much, I think maybe other than Mimic, there's this kind of like dominant male character who's kind of, as you call it, a bastard. He's kind of like that dominant male. He's the human villain. And it's something that I think Del Toro does a really good job at making, because he creates these creatures and these stories for these creatures and a real character to them that really turns around how we view. Like, obviously we always think creatures as like destructive beings and they're kind of always the villain of the story and creature features and stuff like that. But in his movies, the monsters are rarely the bad guys. But in fact, our human nature is much scarier when, they're taken to extremes. And with that, obviously Michael Shannon is perfectly casted here because Michael Shannon is just such a talented actor. And I think that sometimes he doesn't get all the credit that he should have, I guess. Because I guess more in these years since he's been casted into more bigger movies now. But, I mean, like, Michael Shannon is just fantastic. And everything he does, whether he's, like, this bad guy or, like, really good or, like, a really paranoid person, he does it really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Shannon's appearance here as Strickland, he kind of bucks the trend that we've seen in the previous Del Toro movies, where he's always had the handsome brute. When we obviously look at Pan's Labyrinth, we had the stepfather character played by Sergi Lopez. When we look at Devil's Backbone, again we had Uedo Noriega as Jacinto, and where you had these like good-looking guys who did very bad things. Now I don't know. I mean, Michael Shannon may be considered like a good-looking guy to my audience. I don't know, but he didn't seem to sort of fit into that same sort of mold as the other than the sort of guys that we've seen previously. So it was a bit of a change up in that respect, and I'm not sure whether Del Toro decided to had it in mind that he was going to introduce another handsome brute and sort of changed it when he obviously got the ability to cast Michael Shannon in the film. I'm not too sure whether he was ever going to continue the trend in this film, but certainly Michael Shannon really, if you need an antagonistic force in your film, then I think Michael Shannon's kind of like that force of nature, and he certainly is here, as he's just completely unstoppable. He's very driven in his beliefs, and just watch him play the antagonist here is just really, it has a nice contrast obviously to all the romantic imagery that we obviously see between Alyssa and her amphibian man or Gill-Man, whatever way you want to call it, played by Doug Jones. And whenever I look at look at the monster, I mean, I can't help but obviously draw those comparisons to Abe Sapien just because of the design, even though he's obviously lacks many of Abe's sort of humanistic characters. Just there's certain elements that still sort of link them. I mean, the fact that they both like eggs, they both got these very sort of humanoid sort of qualities to them. So
they both like music.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe perhaps if he was more, as I said, if he wasn't so feral, if he had been more humanized, the links would have been a little more obvious. So, but I mean, how do you? I mean, I think we might as well just sort of get straight to the point with this one. I mean, Alyssa and the amphibian man, their relationship, I mean, did it come off as implausible? Did you buy into the romantic angle here, or?
I mean, I'm kind of like this mega, like, I really like fantasy and I really watch a lot of romance. So I think that, to me, anything is possible. So I didn't think it was impossible. I just think that it was like, it kind of matched the character because Elisa is kind of like, she's odd. Let's put it that way. She's very odd. She's kind of, she seems like, you know, she really plays the part where, you know, Sally Hawkins makes it really believable that, you know, she deep down believes she doesn't fit in. Like, she's kind of like odd and she doesn't fit in. And it goes with, you know, everybody that she's really good friends with. You know, Giles, who is played by Richard Jenkins.
Yeah.
And he also is the narrator of the story, which I'm going to touch on a little later, I think, on another point. But, I mean, like, you know, Richard Jenkins at that time was, you know, being a kind of like a gay man, a closeted gay man. He doesn't really acknowledge it. He's not really successful either. He seems to be, you know, falling behind with times as well. So there's a lot of things that, you know, Richard Jenkins also brings to the table, obviously, because he's also a really great actor himself. At the same time, you know, you have Octavia Spencer, who plays Zelda, who, you know, I love Octavia Spencer. I think she's really fantastic because she has a really great attitude. And she kind of adds this, like, you know, she balances out all those quiet moments with Elisa not speaking, you know. So it's interesting to see, you know, the balance that all these characters brought to the table, making, you know, the fact that it really emphasizes how odd she is.
Yeah.
And in that sense, as she connects with this creature who she feels like she can teach, because she can teach to be like her. So that's why she's teaching her sign language. And, you know, she feels this connection to him. And obviously, I'm sure there's some sort of, like, attraction to him because, you know, he is this kind of, like, the monster is designed in a way where he has, like, a bunch of, like, very, like, a really well-cut body, I guess. And at the same time, you know, he's not ugly. He's kind of charming if you look at it a few more times. A little bit creaturey amphibians on that angle, obviously. But I think she sees it a little different. Is that, you know, love can be in all types of forms, and for her, you know, she feels this is kind of like something that, you know, she really feels this connection, and she really feels that, you know, this is I don't know, like, I don't know how to word it, but I think that she really desires something like this at this moment, and that's why we also have, like, a lot of nudity, and we always have that, you know, that masturbation scene with her in the bathtub.
Oh yeah, that was the first, like, 5 minutes of the film. It was like,
yeah, exactly.
What the hell?
Yeah. So I think that was all a lead up to just her really wanting someone in her life, and this kind of amphibian man coming into her life at that time, who also didn't fit in and was being, you know, looked down on and, you know, not treated well in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I look at the character Alyssa, it's very, I kind of want to compare to Audrey Tauto's character in Amelie. The fact that she's sort of like this, I think if this was obviously set in a later period, we'd call her a manic pixie dream girl, but here she's got these sort of odd qualities, but at the same time she's got a very good and warm nature to her, so you can understand why people sort of are drawn to her and so willing to sort of work with her, and be it obviously when the older characters have different, like, ways that they sort of communicate with her. When we look at Giles, it's very much sort of like based around the sign language. When we look at Zelda, though, she sort of picks up on different sort of gestures and expressions, and she kind of fills in a lot of her own blanks. I mean, the sequence with them where they're talking, the sort of like the next day after that, she sort of like gives into urges and has sex with the amphibian man, and they're having a conversation about how that actually works, and just the simple hand gestures for how where he hides his penis, should we say. It was just, I thought it was just kind of charming. It was just to see the two mimic the hand movements, and you see like Zelda's face of like, oh, so that's how that works. I thought that was kind of charming. I mean, the jumping off point where the two, where Alyssa and the Gill-Man sort of start their romance is a bit clumsy. The lead up is fine, and once they're established as being in a relationship, it's fine. And certainly Del Toro at least gives us the benefit of providing enough humanistic qualities there so it's not so much of a leap. It's not like she's hooking up with like something like The Thing or like whenever, I mean, even when we look at Hellboy and we look at Tom Hanks' character, the fact that she's in this relationship with Hellboy, who has, again, he's very sort of got very humanoid in his appearance, and if it weren't for the horns and the big right hand, I mean, he's a very sort of humanoid sort of appearance. It's not like he's got anything particularly strange there. So I think he kind of pushes the boat out a little more with the Gill-Man, because with the Gill-Man, it's very, as I said, it's a lot more. Requires a little more, I don't know, belief from the audience, should we say, that that this relationship will work. But as it goes on, I mean, the more you see it, the more you sort of like, you come to accept it. It's like, yeah, her boyfriend just happens to be a Gill-Man.
Well, I think I always say this about romance, is that part of a successful romance movie is making it charmingly believable. So you really need to believe in, the romance that they feel for each other. And I think that I'm not sure about the creature, like the creature himself, the Gill-Man himself, like whether I actually believe his feelings until, like you said, it was a bit clumsy in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then at, the second half, you really see, the connection they have. But, in the beginning, I think that the charm really comes from Sally Hawkins playing, but being Alyssa. She really brings out that, she's kind of like, she feels very innocent. And at the same time, she also has that kind of like, it's kind of like, a puppy love sort of feeling, where it's so cute, and the things she does sometimes is also makes her such a charming person also, like those things when, she sits with like Giles and they're watching TV and they have this like dancing scene and they start tapping her feet, and it's like, and then at the same time she always does that, like, and we realize where that comes from, because before that, as she was leaving the place, she like taps a little dance before she goes to work.
Yeah.
And it really brings like this kind of like positive character to her. And then we soon see these layers in her that, as we learn about, as she explains why she wants to rescue the creature, and just from there we start seeing, there is this, more lonely side to her, and just the desire she has to be with, and the necessity she has of being with this person, because, her love has become so strong that she's willing to do anything, no matter the danger, to be with the person that she loves. And I think that in that sense, at that point, I think was when I was really convinced, because it was such a strong feeling of, romance and love and just, the connection she had.
Yeah. I have to obviously question the plan, because her main sort of plan is that she's going to release him into this nearby canal, which opens up into the ocean. Why does it have to be based around this canal? I mean, obviously we've got to have this reason for him to be in her apartment, but is there no other way to get to the ocean in this city? Is it just this one access point for the canal? It just seemed like a an unnecessarily way to sort of stall the plot. I mean, obviously it's important in terms of their relationship and the fact that initially she's keeping him in her bathtub, and then as it goes on and their relationship sort of intensifies, we go into these more fantastical moments where she's flooding her bathroom, like somehow she's able to fill her bathroom with water, which doesn't cause the ceiling to cave in or anything like that. It creates this magical room of water that only causes a small amount of water to run into the sort of dime cinema that's underneath her apartment. So, and I think there's so many moments in this film where Del Toro seems to be like, I'm just going to skip out on plausibility just because I really like how this is going to look. And certainly when we look at that flooded bathroom sequence where the two are sort of holding each other in the submersion underwater, it's so stunning to watch. And how that's sort of replicated when we get the sort of final shot of the film at the end, where you can see that they're now finally free. They're not confined to this room. They're now free to go wherever they want to go, even though it does kind of leave it open-ended what actually happens. I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's the part which I think that, the narrator being a big part of it is retelling the story in a lot of ways. At the end, we learn that it's really through his imagination also, because in his mind, the ending is imagining a good ending, right?
Yeah.
It imagines that it's a good ending, but it also tells us that, well, this is what he thinks happens. And obviously, like, I bring this up as the narrator is also Richard Jenkins, who plays Giles, who kind of witnessed the ending part. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that... I don't know what else to say. No, but I think that another part to talk about, other than, the romance, is that we also have this kind of, like... we have the part with Strickland and just the creature, and then we have Michael Stuhlbarg being Dr. Hofstetler, and that's another big part of the story. And if we talk about, that escape scene, I think that the rescuing of him was really more detailed and successful only because Dr. Hofstetler decided to step in and help them.
Yeah, I mean... It's interesting, obviously, with Hostetler, because he's got this, obviously, he shows his fascination with this creature, whereas when we look at Michael Shannon's character, he's just basically, it's sort of like, if they want to destroy the creature, fine, we'll destroy the creature. He cares very little for it. And it's kind of interesting, obviously, when we get further into the film, and I'm just going to say we're just going to maybe spoil us ahead, so if you haven't seen this film,
already spoiled it on a ton of stuff,
so yeah, I mean, if we haven't spoiled it for you already, we're probably going to spoil some other stuff for you now. And when we find out that he's actually a Soviet spy later in the film, and I kind of love the fact that it's all these minority sort of groups that help her. Obviously Giles is gay, Octavia is black, and with Hofstadter, he's secret Soviet spy. And just the fact that all these groups are the ones that choose to help Alyssa, I thought was a really interesting sort of theme that...
But it's really, as you bring that up, it's really funny because I find that even more funny if you think about... I found it as enjoyable as ever because Michael Shannon was Strickland was such a villainous character that when we see these things happen, like these bad things happen to him, like, bad karma coming back around, like his new car gets smashed, and then he comes back around and he's like, oh, who's responsible for this? And it's just like, who are you, what, give me names and ranks and stuff. And it was just like, no ranks, no names. They just clean. And then you just see, like, he's been messed with by, like, who he believes is the lowest in his chain of command. And I think that really kicks him.
Well,
kicks him in the ass, because it's really, It's really like for a character like him, who believes in, the dominant male, who really, says a lot of things to belittle, Alyssa and Zelda. We really see, like that moment where he doesn't believe that that's really happening to him.
Yeah, and it's funny you should mention his car, because I mean the car that he's driving around in, this puce car, but he's convinced that it's green, because for some reason there's this real obsession with the colour green running through this movie. Everything seems to be green, and all the food is green, and characters constantly talk about green being the colour like the colour of the future, and it's this really desirable colour. And the fact he buys this puce car and the salesman convinces him it's green, it's what is this obsession with green? I've been trying to find like some like great revelation of it on the internet since I watched it this morning, and no one can seemingly nail down what is the purpose of green. I mean, there's a lot of people saying that green is associated with falseness, which would make red the color of truth, because she obviously, when we look at Alyssa the day after she has sex with the Gill-Man, she's wearing a red dress. And did you have any theories on the color green?
I don't really have any theories. I thought it was just like a choice, because it was like, so related to, the water and all that,
yeah.
and just being underwater, and the creature itself being kind of green. And I think it was just, for me, I think it was just a color design. But I mean, since you mentioned it, because maybe it's kind of like, maybe it's like green is the future, is kind of like the environment, because obviously right now green is the future. So maybe it has something to do with that, I would say.
So you cut out completely then. So you were saying maybe it's...
I said maybe, maybe it has to do with like, the fact that, green is the future, as in like the environment right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it in that sense, there's a lot of, like, the creature himself is part of nature. The Amazonians worshipped him as a god, and and that's kind of like, maybe it's a bit of kind of like just saying how they're not treating nature the way better, because like they have no regard, like as you said, like Strickland has no regard for this creature and all that stuff, and that's why he hates green so much, because he was really against this whole like green car thing. Oh, I hate green, I don't want to see green kind of thing, yeah. Right? So I think that perhaps that's the deal right now, is that he doesn't, maybe it's also the fact that he doesn't believe in this natural greatness and all this preserving of that of the environment and all that sort of stuff. I don't know.
I mean, it did the green jello we see did look pretty good. And I love the fact that Giles keeps buying pie, because he's attracted to this guy who works at
and then has a key lime pie, which is also green.
Yeah, and the fact he's just got all these pies that he's bought in his fridge. It's just like all he has in his fridge is just half-eaten pies, which I think was such a really cool shot. Because they're all, especially when you look in there, they're all nearly identical slices. It was, but yeah, I mean, I just really loved the use of colour in this film. It was very Wes Anderson-esque in the fact that Del Toro was clearly working with a colour palette here, and he used it to really great effect, and it really ties in nicely to the visual style that runs throughout this film. I mean, it's very sort of dreamlike. It's very reminiscent of Jeanette and Caro, who did films like Delicatessen and City of Lost Children. And I think they're a pair of directors we've frequently referenced their work as we've gone through the Del Toro filmography. And while they're crafting sort of adult fairy tales, and Del Toro's sort of doing his own sort of take on sort of fairy tales and monsters and things. It's this film, I have to say, is really Del Toro's most fantastical. The other films all seem to have these like very grounded sort of elements to them, but with Shape of Water, it's just him really just sort of like just really putting it all out there, and just as I said, just just enjoying being a visual director. I mean, at one point, the film was going to be shot in black and white, and I kind of like to think they reshot it in black and white, that only certain objects would have been like colourified, as in like, Schindler's List and Rumblefish and like Sin City, and part of me just wishes that it would just be like the green jello that'd be like you would see see the colour of that, and everything else would be black and white.
Yeah, it'd be a bit like Sin City, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I can see where you're going with that. I didn't know that originally that was in the plans. But I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more in black and white, and like what you said, with like hints of color, maybe like that emphasis on green or that emphasis on whatever,
Yeah, I mean,
it would have given it a different twist, I think, because I think that The Shape of Water is a really great film. I think that I struggle sometimes to see films and really believe whether it is best picture quality.
Okay.
Best director for sure. I do agree on that. But I don't remember what else was in the competition that year, so I don't know.
I mean, the Academy Awards, they're pretty notorious for missing it. When we look at the year that Drive and We Need to Talk About Kevin came out and both got sort of snubbed for either like best actor awards, especially Tilda Swinton, who deserved a best actor nomination for that movie and just got snubbed completely. But certainly when we look at the best picture category for that year, we've got Call Me By Your Name, aka Brolita, Darkest Hour, which I think was just more based on Gary Oldman's performance than anything there. Dunkirk, Get Out. Get Out's pretty standard. Same with Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, much like The Post and Three Billboards. There's nothing as visually driven as A Shape of Water, and certainly
definitely. If you look at all the titles that you've mentioned right now, it's definitely, this is more well-rounded.
Looking at that thing, Lady Bird, I would say a big contender, but it's too indie for the Academy to consider it for like the big prize. It's so difficult to like look at this, because you look at it and it was a very indie sort of field. Three Billboards, that's indie. Get Out was obviously very indie, and Call Me By Your Name could potentially have took it, or Darkest Hour. But yeah, I think I'm happy with I have no qualms with them winning Best Picture in that category. I think it definitely deserved it. So
yeah, for sure. I remember the first time I watched it, and I was really, really into it. I had little issues with it. I think a lot of it is just, I think it's what you started talking about, like a lot of the plausibility of it.
Yeah. And
then it's like, if you think too much about it, you're like, well, that's kind of impossible. But then when you watch Del Toro, you kind of have this like fantasy meter that kind of just goes over the top, and you're okay with these things because that's just where his imagination goes. And because of that fantasy element, like a lot of impossible things become plausible. So I think that makes it like okay. And plus, like, there's that whole visual thing that's really nice to look at. And I think the story was done really well. Probably one of his best stories he's written, I would say. Especially in that whole romance sort of concept, and the really making this like villain, everyone had a lot of layers to them. No one felt like they weren't, they were dispensable, or they could be removed and it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's just looking at over the cast of characters here, there is no one that I can see who you would sort of take out. Even when you look at sort of more minor characters, when we like look at the owner of the cinema and just the importance the cinema sort of plays in terms of their relationship, because obviously the amphibian man, when he gets sort of chased off by Giles because he attempts to eat one of his cats, and
that was so, I hate scenes like that. I can't deal with like cats being eaten and stuff. I love them too much to watch that. Every time I keep remembering it, and I'm just like, oh, that's so sad.
And he obviously for some reason the Gill-Man runs off to the cinema, and he's there watching Bible movies, and I don't know if that was supposed to sort of teach him more about humanity or what was supposed to be going on there, but just seeing the two characters sort of unite there, it brings into it gives it the location of purpose. So it's a film I think I need to go back and I need to watch a couple more times to fully appreciate all the little subtleties. I mean, we haven't even sort of touched on the magical powers of the Gill-Man, who's able to, give Giles back his hair, and obviously his abilities play very sort of key part in the sort of final scenes of this film. Although I did think that his sort of revenge on Strickland was a bit over and done with a bit quick. It was sort of like, you could have done this all this time, and you wait till now to do this.
Yeah, I mean, why'd you just take his fingers the first time? If I was getting tortured by someone, I'd just, be done with it, right?
Well, I mean, he did have a cattle prod at the time. And
I guess, yeah.
Another green thing, the pussy fingers.
So disgusting. Oh.
But, I mean, Strickland, he pulls off his own finger. Which, when he's talking to Zelda's husband, he sort of loses it and he throws his finger across the room. Yeah. So you gotta respect a man who's willing to pull off his own fingers to make a point. So,
well, to be fair, it was rotting, so
yeah.
I don't know how much pain he actually felt from that, but I just it's just it feels like kind of like Strickland was where are they? They're in Baltimore or something, right? And I can't remember where they're at, and he completely disses where he is at.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, this is a horrible place to be." And lo and behold, it gets much worse for him than it gets better. So, he's just hit with a lot of bad luck. And I don't know, maybe it's just, I really think it has a lot to do with karma really just coming back to bite him in the ass. But it was, because the villain was, there was so much bad to him in all manners that, I think it was one of the most satisfying villains I've ever watched, especially when you see, all the crap that happens to him, and then at the end, it was a very quick end, but I think that if they kept him going and going, it would be kind of watching, I don't remember what Mission Impossible it was, but there was one Mission Impossible with that guy in blue. Was it Michael Blomkist? Can't remember. Who plays a villain, and he just keeps coming back, even falling off floors and everything. And it's just, I hate villains like that.
Yeah. I mean, at least Del Toro at least makes the effort to try and humanize him. When we see his white picket fence existence he has away from the facility, where he's got the wife and he's got the two kids, and but then I feel that still doesn't really humanize him. It kind of makes him kind of a bad guy also, because it kind of emphasizes on, that those dominant male factors that he has of, really controlling his wife, and his wife says something and then, in his mind, he's already obsessing over something else, and, really, shutting her up and stuff like that. I don't know. I felt like he wasn't. Yeah. I was just about to say the scene when he first goes back to his house, and he's having sex with his wife, and she's complaining that he's getting blood on her, and he think he puts his hand over her mouth or something. I wasn't sure there was some deeper meaning to where his mind was supposed to be at that point, or whether it's just supposed to show his sort of his single-minded mentality.
It's his. I believe the first time I watched it, and this time as well, that it was his fascination with Elisa and the idea of, having a woman who didn't talk, and that sort of imagination behind it.
Yeah. It's certainly interesting to see Del Toro I mean, I would say it's interesting to see Del Toro shoot such a sexy movie, but he certainly had elements of sex in his other films, especially his Spanish language films. When we look at Devil's Backbone in particular, there are some interesting sexy moments, but they were sort of like very post sort of sequences where here he shoots a very sort of like a cinema de look style when it comes to shooting nudity. It's never sort of like feels gratuitous. It feels very sort of natural, the sort of nudity that's included in the film. And I don't know, I mean, it can't be often it's surprised when we have that initial sequence where she's there masturbating in the bathtub, and I think all the nudity after that, it just felt, as I said, it never felt like it was out of place. It always felt very sort of natural and fitting of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
Further viewing, I mean, it's not the easiest movie to sort of pair to something else. I mean, it's not like we get a huge amount of monster love stories, but you want to take a crack at it?
I think we mentioned, we actually mentioned everything that I was going to suggest for further viewing. So I was going to, for the fantasy and that kind of like odd girl element, I chose Emily.
Yeah.
And then for, just the fact that I had, I linked this movie early on when we watched Hellboy to Abe Sapien. I recommended, I would say further viewing would be Hellboy 1 and 2.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think those are definitely good picks. I mean, obviously the most obvious one is if you're as interested, you want to see sort of like the roots of this character, then you go back and you watch, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the definitive Gill-Man, and I think that's sort of like where my mind just wants to go to. I mean, yes, there are other creepy romances you can watch out there. I mean, you can watch Hellraiser. It's not anywhere as romantic as this movie, but it features a very unique romantic element to it, certainly. So, but those, I think that was where I would sort of go back and watch some like classic Hammer, because it's certainly running throughout this film. And I mean, the character of Giles, I mean, was originally written for Ian McKellen, because Del Toro saw Gods and Monsters, which was about James Whale, who was the director of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, and he himself, I mean, he was a closeted gay man, and that's a real sort of inspiration for the character of Giles. I mean, and it was just, as I say, it was unfortunate that McKellen couldn't take the part, and he just emailed over to Richard Jenkins, who took on the part, and I think he did a really great job. It's very sort of subtle, and as I said, it really sort of captures what this character should be. So here we are. I mean, obviously we're at the end of another season. We did it.
It's not that impossible. Del Toro is kind of like one of those directors that we both like a lot. So I think that, as we end this up with, talking about, as just like our last season, we're going to talk about, what our picks for best, worst, and hidden gem is. That's where the hard part is there's a lot of, struggle and being okay with what you're going to pick as best, worst, and hidden gem.
Yeah. So, I mean, which would you like to start with? Should we start with best then?
Maybe we start with worst.
Okay, we'll start with worst. Worst is probably the easiest one for myself. I know for myself the worst thing in the filmography is Crimson Peak. I found it an absolutely tedious watch that did nothing for me. It's very pretty, but at the same time it just feels very hollow at the same time. So that'd be my one to burn out of this filmography for sure.
I'm actually, surprisingly, I think, you probably didn't think I would choose it, but I actually chose Crimson Peak as worst also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think that if you think about Del Toro's films, there's not really bad movies.
No.
Like, there's nothing that stands out as bad. Even Crimson Peak has, its elements that, it's good at, like, visuals and stuff like that, right? But the deal with Crimson Peak of why I ended up choosing it eventually, because it was really that or Blade 2. And I sat down and I thought about it, and I was like, I would much willingly rewatch Blade 2 again for its entertainment purposes
Yeah.
than Crimson Peak, which is, I watched it a second time and I thought it was, it doesn't stand up to repeat viewings. And I think that that's one of the worst, because with Del Toro, every single film that we've seen, I can picture myself going back and sitting down and rewatching it again. And yet, Crimson Peak, after watching it a second time, I really don't want to watch it a third time. I think I've had enough.
Okay, and what's the best of the filmography then?
How about you go first?
I knew you threw that at me. For myself, I think this is probably going to be a bit obvious, but my favourite of the filmography is actually Pacific Rim. I mean, yes, I'm a kaiju fan. I love giant monster movies and I love giant mecha movies, and it's really sort of tapped into such a wonderful vibe for myself. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who think that it's dumb, and I think if you have got any sort of reference point of things like, as I said, such as like Godzilla, then it really sort of plays into a lot of those tropes, and you can see it's really just Del Toro doing his love letter to giant monster movies. And there's so many elements in that film, just the design work and the characters and the world building that went into that film, that just really I just absolutely adore. I mean, it's a big dumb movie, but at the same time it's just a lot of fun. And whereas when I look at his other sort of big Hollywood pictures, I say like Blade 2 and the Hellboy movies, it feels very sort of separate to the rest of the filmography, whereas Pacific Rim, while it is obviously still a sort of mainstream studio movie and something a little more traditional, it still feels very much part of the Del Toro filmography, and I think that's why it's one of those ones that I find myself coming back to more and more. So yeah. What about yourself, Kim?
I definitely am happy that you chose Pacific Rim. Not that I'm surprised that you chose it.
Okay.
Because I know your love for Pacific Rim. That was definitely a contender for me, but I ended up, after a lot of debate, I think I was between 3 movies, I ended up choosing the first movie that I watched of Del Toro's, and that's Pan's Labyrinth. I don't think that anything could ever beat Pan's Labyrinth, in the sense that I really liked, the villain. I really liked the fantasy. I really liked the little girl who played the role. There's a good balance between, evil, and they're the amazing creature designs. And I don't think he will ever make a character quite as scary as, the pale man, right? And I think that that's kind of like the peak of his career at that point. I know it sounds like, a pretty cliched choice. I know a lot of people are going to choose it. Like, if they were to choose favorite Del Toro, they'd probably choose Pan's Labyrinth. But I really think that, Del Toro really knocked it out of the park with that one. Like, that one is one movie that I will, no arguments, sit down and watch it over and over again. And I think at this point, like, as of the last time that we reviewed it, I had already seen it like probably 4 times or something. But that's because I didn't see it, like, it wasn't released that long ago. So, yeah. Pan's Labyrinth, I really like it a lot.
It's funny how synonymous the Pale Man has become with Del Toro. It's become almost like his little sidekick. It constantly seems to turn up wherever he does, whenever someone like makes a reference to it. And most recently, I mean, Del Toro did a cameo on The Simpsons, where he's doing a court video to humanize Mr. Burns, and he's like talking about how monsters are misunderstood. And they cut to the Burns mansion, and it's like this fantastical thing with all these different monsters, like Mr. Smithers is a centaur, and the Pale Man is his doorman, which I thought was just really funny.
Okay, so let's move on. We're on obviously our third choice, and that's the Hidden Gem.
Yeah.
I had to ask you to re-clarify what Hidden Gem was, because Del Toro's movies, let's face it, is mostly quite popular. So what was your choice of Hidden Gem?
My choice is a film that, upon rewatching it for this season, I think I watched it a further 3 or 4 times afterwards. I was that sort of, I forgot how good it was and was so enthralled by it. And that is Kronos. It's his debut film, and yes, it's obviously, it's got its sort of flaws, but there's just a lot of visuals and certainly a lot of moments, and particularly the character of Angel, the first appearance of Ron Perlman in a Del Toro movie, that just really, it just really makes me resonate with it. I just love his character and just the journey his character goes on, even as the villain. I think he just has so many interesting moments, such as like when he's going back and forth to the clean room, or when he's just like sitting in his little room that he's been assigned, looking at like rhinoplasty magazines. I think there's just so many like interesting shots and moments, and I think just the whole sort of concept, this unique take on the vampire mythos, just really sort of makes it stand out for me. And I honestly forgot how good that film is, because it had been a while since I saw it before we obviously revisited it for this season. And yeah, I think Kronos is sort of like my little hidden gem. I mean, there's other films I'll point to, and I think I'm not going to say what they are until I obviously see what you chose, because I feel that you may have picked my second choice. But what was your hidden gem?
Okay, so the reason why I brought up the fact that I had to clarify with you what the hidden gem was, and I had already mentioned to you what I was debating between, and then you told me that title was fairly popular. So I ended up not choosing that one, and I chose my second choice, which is Kronos.
Oh, really? I was sure that you were going to say Mimic.
I want to say Mimic, but then you told me it was popular, so I was like, if it's popular, it can't be a hidden gem, can it?
It can be still popular. So, I mean, when you look at the hidden gem, you look at the filmography, it's like, if I said Joe Moviegoer on the street, it's like, name a Del Toro movie. I don't think that they would name Kronos, and I don't think they would name Mimic, and I'd say don't think they do Devil's Backbone, so... Yeah.
So, to be fair, I think that, I think a lot of the Spanish language ones were definitely more of a hidden gem. But, like, if you're saying that Mimic can count, then I'm going to go to Mimic. Yeah. Because, honestly, Kronos and Mimic are, I personally like Mimic more. But I also think Kronos is, I'm always a big fan of people going back to watching how a director debuts. And I think Kronos is, like, a solid effort. So, I mean, my hidden gem that I have on paper right now is Kronos. But if we were to say, I would say Mimic is also a hidden gem. I really, like, it's my type of movie, like, where it's definitely one of those really competent kind of, like, there's, it's bugs, and it's kind of like a creature feature, like his take of a creature feature. I think, like, Mimic has a lot of really strong points to it. And there's, like, just, and plus there's, like, all these, like, cameos of people that now are very famous also. So it's kind of like a starting point for a lot of people, not only, like, Del Toro's first step into Hollywood as well. So, both of those films are hidden gems. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't.
Wonderful. So, I mean, this obviously brings us to the end of our second season. We hope you've enjoyed joining us for this trek for the Del Toro filmography. Certainly, I'd like to say thank you to all our guests. Thank you to Greg. I'd also like to say thank you to Bubba Wheat from Flight Sites and Movie Nights. Thank you to Stephen from the Asian Cinema Film Club and Guido Ramblins. And thank you to DJ from Simplistic Reviews. Yep. And obviously, as well, I'd like to say thank you to Norman from Flick Hunter. So, very guest-heavy season, and I think it's been fun, obviously, inviting people on to share this discussion with us, and we certainly had some fun episodes there as well, so definitely check those out. And as always, you can find our full archive on podcast.wordpress.com. On there you can find our complete archive, as well as you can check it out on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, all over there, and wherever you happen to listen to us, maybe leave us a like or a review. or hit the subscribe button. It all helps raise the profile of the show. You can also follow us on both Facebook and Twitter, where we post interesting bits, not only on the director, but also interesting news pieces and reviews. So that's all on there. And I mean, obviously, our next set of episodes we're going to be now moving over to after hours episodes. And
so yeah, we have 3 things worked out right now. We have our I guess set theme right now is our collective choice, which is a sharp theme movie.
Yep.
Which I believe will be our next episode, the first episode to kick off the after hours.
Yeah, so it's so our next one will be obviously our Shark Week episode, but I think we've chosen a really good one, because obviously the first Shark Week we looked at the Meg, and this time we're looking at a real sort of classic of the shark movie genre. Would you say, Kim?
Yes. Definitely one of my favorite.
As we're going to be looking at the classic Deep Blue Sea. And we also got a couple of after hours episodes that will be following that, where both myself and Kim will be sharing a couple of our picks. And certainly if you want to,
our picks,
certainly if you want to check out more of our sort of the movies which sort of inspire us and that we enjoy, make sure you join us for our Friday Film Club that we post every Friday on the blog. Each week, myself and Kim, we both pick a film. Will there be a theme? Will there won't be? You have to check it and find out. But we've had some really interesting selections since we started doing it, and we urge you, as always, to tell us what you're going to be watching at the weekend, and we'll share it as part of the roundup. So that's as I said, you can find all that on the blog. But again, just thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed this season. And stay tuned for season 3. We'll be revealing our director of choice very soon in the upcoming episode, so keep tuned to find out who that's going to be. And until next time, I'd just like to thank my co-host Kim, as always, and thank you for listening, and we will see you next time for Deep Blue Sea.